Welcome back, everybody, to Two Guys and a Stack of Comics. My name is Reed. Along with me, as always, is Mike. We are here to go through Absolute Batman number four, fourth issue of this series from Scott Snyder. We actually get a fill-in artist on this. It's Gabriel Hernandez Walta. I think he's famous for his work on Vision with Tom King a couple years ago. So we do get a fill-in artist already on issue four. What Mike and I are going to do, we're just going to sort of recap the issue, what took place, and then kind of give our overall thoughts on the comic book. Mike, how
Spoiler
you doing,
alert.
sir?
Spoiler alert. Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
spoilers, obviously, for this. We know it's Wednesday, but yeah, if you haven't read it yet, we will kind of go through. We're not going to show all the panels. We'll at least kind of give a flavor of the comic. So here is our A cover here, and then I believe this is the B or C cover. I kind of just pick up two copies of it.
I like the B
So
cover better.
I will say I do think on all the Absolute comics they've been doing a better job on the variant covers than they have on the main covers. That's kind of annoying. I feel like there should be like the best cover should be the standard one, but I guess that's why they're charging you $1 more
Yep.
for the cardstock one.
It's
Um,
exactly why.
so this book, interestingly enough, this kind of starts, and I'll preface what we're going to say in the whole review. We loved issue three. Issue three had a major cliffhanger at the end. We also saw the same thing happen with Absolute Superman. And instead of picking up with that cliffhanger, this is all of a flashback issue. Now, if you look into it a little bit, it's because the main artist needed a break, I suppose, after the first three issues. So they got to fill in. This issue is all kind of filling out as much of Absolute Batman's backstory as possible. I think what Mike and I would say is while we liked the issue, you do wonder why this just wasn't the first issue
I
instead.
know.
Like, why 4 months in we're doing a backstory, leaving us on a cliffhanger? It's one of these things I just have noticed a lot in entertainment lately, where they love to either on a TV show or a comic book build up a cliffhanger, get you all excited, and either the next episode or the next issue doesn't pick up with the cliffhanger. It's kind of annoying, even though I will say I liked this issue. I will say that alone kind of annoyed me going forward. But we'll kind of go through the issue real quick. So this sort of starts, it's obviously a backstory issue. This takes place right after Bruce, his father's been murdered. So they show him in the courtroom. He wants to address kind of the jury and the members of the court before Joe Chill, who shot his father, is sentenced. And then they kind of, after that, go back to another flashback. So I guess a flashback within a flashback inside the issue. And so at the beginning, they kind of
That's a
show,
double flash.
yeah, I
Double
guess like an
flashback.
Inception flashback sort of thing.
Yeah.
Um, they show some flashbacks. There's gangs that are running Gotham. They're kind of extorting people for money, and we get sort of our first look at this initial Batman that's here. So this is his, I guess, his first costume. Has kind of like a black and gray sort of stitched pattern to it. He has like fangs on. The eyes are red. It's a cool looking costume, but it is a little bit weird. They also have him using like a voice modulator, and yeah, obviously the fangs is kind of weird. But what I will say is, while the stuff, and I think it looks okay on the page, and I do think the art was pretty cool for this scene. He saves the lady who was being extorted and knocks out the criminals, obviously. But at that point, he also has to pull out a gun. He doesn't use it or
What?
shoot anybody, but he's more using it for fear and intimidation. And so this
What?
leads to him kind of analyzing his costume, and he essentially decides this isn't working. So he throws out the fangs, he throws out the older costume, throws away the gun, throws away the voice modulator. So if you hated that part, the comic itself kind of even addresses that. He looks at it and goes, "This is ridiculous. It's not working," and sort of he's looking for a better way. And so then there's a lot of interlaced flashbacks of Bruce sort of working out, getting stronger, planning. I thought it was some really strong writing. They show him kind of surveilling Gotham and kind of getting the lay of the land. He's figured out that a lot of guns and weapons are being trafficked into Gotham through the Falcones and the Maronis. And so a lot of this issue is just showing Bruce as a younger detective, sort of figuring things out, finding out where all the players are on the chessboard. And I did like that part of it, especially because the first couple issues, you and I had questions of like, okay, he no longer has the billionaire resources. How did he figure all this stuff out? There's at least a little bit of an effort to show how he was able to piece some of these together. A lot of the issue also has some interlaced issues with him and his father, him building kind of the project that won him that trip to the zoo where his dad was shot. And a
I
lot
thought
of
that
those
was pretty cool.
flashbacks, huh?
I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think what was cool about that is it showed Thomas Wayne as an actual character rather than just someone who got, shot. We see a lot of Thomas Wayne talking about how, he wanted to become a surgeon because his father had died of a heart attack and he wanted to take a job that would have saved his father, kind of foreshadowing Bruce deciding to become Batman. And then Thomas sort of walks through that instead. He got married, he had a kid, he loves being a teacher. It's great. He has a happy life. And they really show a cool dynamic with Bruce and him where you kind of understand obviously why that would mean so much to Bruce. And I liked that. It was great to see Thomas Wayne just portrayed as a good guy again. There's been so many efforts lately to make him shady. We get some other things, so we get some instances where the guns and traffic are being trafficked in the city. Batman actually has like a mini RC car that he loads with C4, and then he
He
uses that to kind of
runs it
flip
around.
over the truck. So the flipping over the summit kind of reminded me a little bit of the Dark Knight. Obviously, not as cool as what was done in that movie, but you could see they're pulling some influences from it. And they actually do address with the RC car and what he has. He kind of says all of this for under $1,000. So they at least seem to be trying to address kind of the bat budget that he would have as this sort of lower class Batman.
You do wonder how a regular guy could get C4 though.
Yes, like I don't know what amount of money he had to find that.
Maybe he
Um,
went to the Falcones.
they do have where they show Bruce at a young age, he's building this project, and they show even as a young man, he's very good at engineering things. He's very good at building. His father's very impressed with the design. And there's a lot of talk between him and his dad about what he's designing because the project comes from the local zoo and they're saying build a habitat kind of like for animals. And so Bruce is building it more from an intimidation factor, saying that'll buy protection for people. His dad's kind of telling him, well, but they should all feel safe. And so there's a cool little dynamic there of like the dad's perspective and his perspective. And I thought that was well done. They do go back to that flashback of Bruce at the trial. And he basically tells Joe Chill, like, that was one of the only times in my life I was truly happy. My father was proud of me, and you took that from me. You took that moment. It'll never happen. And they show Bruce was very angry as a kid. They do show a little bit of him training, obviously, as well. And then they show him starting kind of building up these, I guess, what does he call them in here? The bat thumb, which is sort of the stuff that we see spiking off of the cape. So we do see at least some efforts made to show how he engineered these things. And they do build it that as a child, he was just very good at just designing things. And so basically the issue sort of ends. There's a party of the rich and elite in Gotham, very similar to kind of Batman Year One, although not as well done, obviously, as that, where Bruce sort of infiltrates and gets more information about what they're doing, and he finds out who the major players are in the city, and he kind of goes through some of the ways these elites in Gotham are destroying the city, where there's people who are like, publicly running on the idea of I'm going to bring jobs back to Gotham, but then they're paying bribes to people who are in like AI and automation, telling them, hey, help me get that in so you have to pay less people. And so there's a little bit more so than the normal Batman comic, I'd say, about Batman being a lower class Batman and having a little more judgment of these sort of tycoons and stuff. Not that Bruce Wayne doesn't do that in the main continuity, because he's always sort of addressed that, but it's a little more
Yeah,
obvious here. You get a pretty cool, decent splash page from the artist on the Batman of the actual absolute Batman costume.
I love
And
that
then
splash page.
the part that I did not like at the end, obviously he kind of just gets information. There's a lot of intel gathering. The part I didn't like is even within this flashback issue, it ends with another cliffhanger of Bruce going to meet Joe Chill in prison, and Joe Chill tells him, "I have something to tell you," and then the issue just ends. So what I don't like about the issue overall, we end on another cliffhanger. So we've got the cliffhanger in the present, and now we have a cliffhanger in the past. It's like, so is issue 5 going to resume this cliffhanger or the other cliffhanger? It just, I will say before I get into what I liked about the issue, my annoyance with this comes at all from the fact that I don't like that 4 issues in, we're already on a fill-in artist, even though I would say I like the fill-in artist actually better than Nick Dragotta. I loved his run on Vision. And so I like the fill-in artist, but it's kind of annoying. Again, this is the biggest book DC's put out in years. We have a fill-in artist on it. You then throw in, we're doing a flashback issue. So we've ditched your main narrative before we've completed the first trade even. And then we end on another cliffhanger where we don't know where we're going next issue. And I think that's a huge issue before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of the actual review. I just think that's a huge fundamental issue by DC in terms of if this was someone's first comic, if someone walked into the comic book store today and went, you know what? I've heard all about this absolute Batman. I'm going to snag an issue. I'm here on a Wednesday. Bam, they got one. Awesome. I'm going to go home and read this. They do get a pretty easy issue to read, a pretty good kind of foundational issue. but the cliffhanger doesn't look like it'll be resumed in the next issue. And so it's just another interesting thing they're doing. I don't know about that whole piece. Mike, what do you think about them already a backup story, already a fill-in artist? What are your thoughts on that? Because I know you and I both liked the issue overall, but what do you think about that?
Yeah, I like the issue. I wish this would have been the first issue.
Mhm.
Because I love a good backstory, and I love character development and all of that. And this issue delivered all of that. It's just weird, the timing, and I guess it's the same writer, right? They didn't change writers.
Scott Snyder. It's still Scott Snyder.
So yeah, so Snyder wrote this one. He wrote a good issue. Um, I have no problems with it. It was fun to read, and it gave me a little bit of a backstory for this new Bruce Wayne, which I enjoyed. But it is kind of strange because I've been waiting for, what is it, 3 4 weeks now for that cliffhanger.
Cliffhanger to three. And yeah, it's basically, hey, wait another 3 4 weeks.
Yeah, to see if he takes the, what was it, 250 million or
Yeah, the
not.
deal that Black Mask offered him. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're kind of like waiting, and now we're waiting some more.
Yeah.
But what I don't get is, like, how are you going to follow this up? Like, are you going to do for issue 5? Is it going to be a flashback to the flashback? I mean, is it going to be a resolution
Yeah.
of
What
the first
cliffhanger are we
cliffhanger, or is
picking
it?
up on?
eh,
Um, Yeah, I think, and again, they'll probably address both, would be my, I think, because this book has been balancing the narratives of his childhood and his current
So
day.
it just seems kind of weird that it's almost set up for like a bounce back. Like
Mhm.
issue 5 will resolve issue 3,
And then
issue
issue
6
six
will
will
move
resolve.
forward. That's just, it's kind of wonky.
No, there's a straightforward storytelling that used to take place in a lot of comic books. When you read Batman Year One, it was one concise narrative, and yes, there was different flashbacks and things that took place, but you never felt like they weren't resolving the issue. And I feel like this happens way too often in comic books. And also, this was my favorite issue of this series so far. I do think this is a fantastic issue. I liked the writing. I thought Snyder addressed a lot of cool things. It was great to see the bat suit being built. It was great to see Batman on a budget and actually implicating that into the plot. I thought the way he identified the players, it felt like a Bruce Wayne issue while adjusting to these new circumstances. And I do think this was a great comic book issue. It's the first comic book of this series where I'd go like, no, that was a really, really good comic.
You
The
almost kind of
problem
wonder
is it
if
should have been the first issue.
yeah, you almost kind of wonder if Snyder had written this issue, to be the starter issue,
Mhm.
and then the powers that be said, "Oh no, we need to start in the present, and we need to
Kind
have
of
all
build
this
back up to
action."
it.
And then when the artist got sick, they were like, "Hey, remember that issue that you were going?"
And that's another issue that I have with it is look, I think Nick Dragotta is doing a really good job on the art. And I do think they picked an artist who's decently close within the same sphere of art style that it's not massively different. But my biggest question again with DC on these things, it's nothing against Nick Dragotta. I mean, we just don't seem to live in a world anymore where people can draw a monthly comic book. I don't know why that is. That used to happen. We just don't live in that world anymore. Maybe it's page rates, maybe whatever it is. But the problem I have is you can't even get me through the first arc anymore. Like, because that's the biggest issue. And again, I say this as a guy who actually prefers this artist over the main one. But the problem is when you have a book, you can't even go through the first trade anymore. On the largest book that you have launched probably in 5 years for DC, you can't even get through the first story arc anymore with one artist. It's like, it's not like Absolute Batman was a rushed project where it's like, well, shoot, every month they're expecting. Like they could have given Dragotta build up time to like, hey man, get the first arc done. And that's always the thing that kills me with comic books is they put these arbitrary timelines on themselves. And it's like, especially with a book like this is not the main ongoing Batman thing where it's like, well, hey, an issue has to come out every month. This was a book where you picked the launch date, you picked the build-up time, you told us when this was happening. I just don't get why we're in a place where you do that, especially because I think if you had just gotten Dragotta through the first trade, you could have done the second set of 5 issues with this artist. And much like Conan, me and you have always talked about what we like Conan is They complete the story. You get 4 issues of Delatorre, and that wraps up the story. And then we bounce to Doug Brathwaite, and he wraps up his story. And then we bounce back. And I think that's all we're looking for as comic book fans is, can you wrap up a story arc with this? I don't expect anymore that everybody will be the same on every page. But
So I
man,
think
like, come on.
what you're saying is this has to deal with continuity of the production of the product by a company who doesn't do continuity very well.
And even if you just had,
Which is our favorite comic book company, by the way.
no, it's just so infuriating, especially on because like I understand on an ongoing Action Comics, Detective Comics, like that's gonna come out every month, right? The wheels turn on those. You got to get it out. This was a comic you picked. Like DC, you launched this. You picked the launch date. Like why you launched it knowing like, yeah, he's only got 3 issues in him and then we got to do a fill-in. It just doesn't make any sense, especially because we're only 4 issues in. If this was issue 12 and now we're filling out the backstory, I feel completely different about it. Because then it's like, okay, we've been following this Batman for about a year. Now we sort of get here's the recap of what came before. There probably would have been mystery and intrigue. This is so new that finding out the backstory, while cool, isn't like, oh wow, that's awesome. Because we just found out about this character 3 months ago in his new circumstances. It's just a weird creative decision, even though I loved
I,
the issue.
I think the only thing that makes sense to me is this was truly an unexpected interruption in the production process where something happened with the original artist and he really couldn't make it. And it probably happened a month and a half ago or 2 months ago.
From what
And
I've
he had,
researched a bit, though, apparently this was planned from the launch of the book. So
oh, it was.
that's the weird part of it is like your circumstance that you illustrate would have made complete sense, right? If it was like, hey man, Nick Dragotta did 3 issues, something happened, he can't do 4, then I completely understand this.
So it wasn't that?
No, as far as we know, this was
Okay.
planned from the beginning. Because I was looking up arms, like, why are we not filling already? And you can go back to articles a couple months ago. They were talking about when the solicitations came out, which solicitations are 3 months in advance. They
Yeah.
knew this is going to be a backup artist, and it's a weird thing because I feel really conflicted on it. And that I would say this was by far the best issue of this series so far. I would give it an A grade. I think it was great, but I will say there's so many frustrating things around it where it's just like even what's the saying, snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. That is
Yeah.
kind of what this feels like. And then it's like, why, man? Like, just you should have just released this as the first issue, and then you go into the story arc and let Drago to finish. It's just an interesting decision overall. I do think it's a good comic book, continues to be good. I'm excited every month for Absolute Batman. Just kind of a disappointing thing that we're already going to fill in a flashback. And even though I liked the book, I do feel like you got to be consistent. We critique this stuff when it's books that we don't like. We got to critique it. Even when they stick the landing, you still got to critique it. And I just think it's something comic books have got to address at some
And to
point of
me,
like,
it's like I don't know what issue 5 is going to be now. Is it going to be the resolution of Cliffhanger 3, or is it going to be continuation of Cliffhanger issue 4?
4 or
Are they going to bounce back and forth? That would be strange if they did, but we'll see. I'm still
overall,
liking
good issue. I think folks will enjoy it if you take it for what it is. And I think both the writing and the art were good on the book overall. Looking forward to the next couple. This has been the standout of this Absolute line so far. But let us know what you guys think. What do you think of the issue? What do you think of Absolute Batman so far? If you're enjoying it, if you agree with us, disagree with us, regardless, we'd love seeing your guys' opinions down below. Thank you as always for watching, folks. God bless you. We'll catch you in our next video.
it. Thanks, everybody.